I remember the rain lashing against the cafe window like an unrelenting confession, each drop a frantic drumbeat echoing the chaos in my chest as I sat there, my fingers accidentally, or was it, grazing hers beneath the scarred wooden table. We were supposed to be just friends. That was the story we'd spun for months, a fragile web of excuses and easy smiles to keep the world at bay. But in that suspended moment, with the dim overhead light casting shadows across her face and the bitter scent of overbrewed coffee hanging heavy in the air, her touch lingered too long, a silent unraveling of the lie we'd both clung to. My heart stuttered, a wild bird trapped in my ribs, and I forced a casual shift in my seat, pretending to adjust my napkin, but my eyes betrayed me, locking onto hers with an intensity that spoke volumes. There it was, the twist I dreaded and craved, the pretense cracking open like the thunder outside, revealing the secret love that had been blooming in the shadows of our every shared glance, every accidental brush of skin. How had we convinced ourselves otherwise? The steam from our cooling lattes twisted upward in lazy spirals, mirroring the way my thoughts coiled around her. Jamie, with her ink-stained fingers and that mischievous tilt to her smile that always left me breathless. The cafe was our sanctuary, a forgotten nook in the city's underbelly where the hum of distant traffic blended with the soft jazz filtering from hidden speakers. I'd chosen it deliberately months back as a safe harbor for our harmless afternoons, but really, it was my covert ritual to steal time with her without the prying eyes of colleagues or her art circle friends. That evening, the storm had rolled in uninvited, trapping us in its gray embrace, the sky-bruising purple as lightning forked across the horizon. I watched her, unable to look away, as she absent-mindedly traced the rim of her cup with one finger, her wild auburn curls escaping their loose tie to frame her face in damp, rebellious strands. The water beaded on the glass pane like tears we hadn't yet shed, and my mind wandered treacherously to the warmth of her breath against my neck, a fantasy I'd banished 1,000 times under the guise of platonic affection. She was Jamie, the whirlwind artist whose canvases bled with unspoken passions, and I was Alex, the meticulous architect in her early 30s, always sketching precise lines while my heart sketched chaos around her. As the downpour intensified, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon, we lingered longer than necessary, our conversation, in my head, at least, laced with the subtext of what we wouldn't say. She stretched her legs under the table, her knee nudging mine in a way that sent a jolt through me, warm and insistent, like sunlight piercing clouds. I told myself it was nothing, just the familiarity of friends, but the lie tasted sour on my tongue. When the rain finally relented to a persistent mist, we gathered our things, her laughter, imagined in my mind as light, and teasing bubbling up as she draped her scarf over my shoulders against the chill. The walk to my apartment was a blur of shared umbrella and sidelong glances, our arms linked for balance on the slick sidewalks, each step amplifying the electric hum between us. Puddles mirrored the city's glow, shattering into liquid stars under our feet, and I felt that invisible tether tighten, pulling me inexorably closer to the edge of confession. At my door, key fumbling in the lock from nerves I hid behind a steady smile, she paused, raindrops clinging to her lashes like tiny jewels. The porch light haloed her, softening the sharp angles of her cheekbones, and for a heartbeat, time fractured. I murmured an invitation inside to wait out the worst of the wet. Practical, I insisted to myself, and she nodded, stepping into the quiet warmth of my space with a grace that made my pulse echo in my ears. The apartment smelled of chamomile tea and aged wood, my haven of blueprints and half-read novels, now invaded by her presence like a vibrant stroke on a monochrome page. We shed our coats in the entryway, hers pooling on the floor in a sodden heap, revealing the simple lines of her sweater clinging to her frame, and I busied myself with towels from the linen closet, my hands trembling faintly as I draped one over her shoulders. She accepted it with a tilt of her head, her eyes meeting mine in the soft lamplight, and the air thickened, charged with the scent of wet earth from outside mingling with her faint lavender perfume. We migrated to the living room couch, a worn leather piece that creaked under our weight, towels draped like makeshift capes as thunder grumbled its retreat. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable but laden, like the pause before a brush dips into paint. Her hand found mine on the cushion between us, fingers brushing tentatively at first, then curling with deliberate intent, her thumb tracing slow, hypnotic circles on my palm. The sensation rippled upward, igniting nerves I hadn't acknowledged in years, and I didn't withdraw. Instead, I mirrored the motion, my touch featherlight, exploring the calluses from her brushes, the subtle veins mapping her wrist like hidden rivers. In that contact, the twist unfurled fully. Our friendship had never been just that. It was elaborate masquerade, woven from stolen moments and suppressed sighs, concealing a love that had taken root in the fertile soil of our shared silences. Admitting it aloud would summon the storm anew, but here, in this cocoon of rain and revelation, I teetered on the brink, heart exposed, curiosity and fear entwining like lovers themselves. The night held its breath, leaving me adrift in the dramatic swell of what might come next, the pretense dissolving drop by drop. The days following that rain-soaked evening blurred into a tapestry of tentative advances and retreating shadows, our connection deepening like roots seeking light beneath the surface. Jamie was a force of nature, her energy a vivid contrast to my measured world, 28 to my 32. She carried the unscarred optimism of someone still chasing horizons, while I navigated with the cautious maps of past detours. We'd crossed paths at that gallery opening 6 months prior, me there on a professional errand to eye potential exhibit spaces for a client, her amid the swirl of admirers, her abstract pieces pulsing with raw emotion. Swirling vortices of color that captured the ache of unspoken desires, mirroring the turmoil I'd buried since my last fractured romance. From the outset, there was an alchemy between us, a quiet fizz in the air during our first exchange about light and shadow in design. Coffee turned to walks to shared sketches, her doodles on my napkins, my precise lines softening under her whimsical additions, but always framed as camaraderie, never more. Yet, the romantic undercurrent eroded our boundaries with insidious grace. Her touches evolved from incidental to intentional, a graze of knuckles as she passed me a book, or the press of her thigh against mine on crowded benches during park picnics. I replayed them in the quiet hours, my inner monologue a relentless tide. Why did her proximity reorder my carefully stacked world? The age gap whispered insecurities. Was I too settled, too scarred for her vibrant chaos? But it also wove a healing thread, her laughter mending the fissures left by exes who had prized control over connection. She drew me out, coaxing stories from my guarded vault with her patient gaze, her presence a balm to the loneliness I'd architected into my life. Our bond layered itself slowly, each encounter adding depth like varnish on canvas. One crisp autumn afternoon, we meandered through the botanical gardens, the air alive with the earthy tang of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. She paused at a bed of late-blooming asters, their purple petals defiant against the fading season, and pulled out her sketch pad, her focus sharpening as pencil met paper. I stood beside her, the sun filtering through branches to dapple her skin in gold, mesmerized by the fluid dance of her hand, precise yet free, echoing the way she navigated life. As a breeze tugged at her curls, sending one spiraling across her cheek, I reached out without forethought, my fingers gentle as I tucked it back, lingering to savor the silk of her hair, the subtle heat radiating from her scalp. The touch hummed between us, a current that raised goose flesh on my arms, and she stilled, her hand rising to cover mine, pressing it against her face for a suspended eternity. My breath caught, thoughts fracturing into shards of wonder. This was the spark, the ignition of the romance I'd harbored in secret, a slow burn kindling hope amid the fear of its consumption. Such intimacies multiplied, weaving humor and heartache into our tapestry. Evenings in my kitchen became ritual, her elbow nudging mine as we diced onions, tears from the sting mingling with laughter I conjured in memory at her exaggerated winces, the steam from simmering sauces curling around us like a lover's embrace. We'd share a bottle of red, the tartness lingering on my tongue long after the glass passed between us, her foot hooking playfully around my ankle under the table. Innocent, we'd insist, but the spark it lit told another tale. Pain shadowed these joys, though, in the unsaid, my nights alone, replaying her departures, the hollow echo of my apartment without her chaos, her fleeting mentions of familial expectations, a conservative lineage that viewed her art as whimsy, her heart as uncharted territory. Still, the chemistry intensified, a magnetic field drawing us into orbits too close to deny. Humor lightened the load sometimes, her surprise reorganizations of my spice rack into alphabetical absurdity, leaving me feigning exasperation while delight bloomed inside, a secret smile tugging at my lips as I restored order. But beneath, longing pulsed, a steady ache that quickened my pulse at her texts, her voice in my mind a siren call. The sensory imprints etched deep, the citrus bite of her shampoo when she hugged me goodbye, clinging to my sweater, the cool press of her palm against my feverish one during a sweltering summer stroll, the way her laughter vibrated through me when we collapsed in giggles over a botched recipe, flour dusting our cheeks like shared war paint. A pivotal escape came that fall, a cabin retreat in the mist-shrouded hills we dubbed a recharge weekend. To any who asked, platonic renewal, nothing more. The drive wound through forests ablaze with turning foliage, the cab filled with her humming to the radio, off-key and endearing, my hands tight on the wheel to steady the flutter in my chest. The cabin nestled by a whispering stream, its wooden bones creaking welcome, scented with pine resin and hearth smoke. We unpacked in companionable quiet, her tossing pillows haphazardly while I aligned them just so, our contrasting rhythms a dance in itself. Evenings by the fire drew us inexorably closer, sharing a woolen throw against the chill, her body heat seeping through layers, thawing the frost I'd built around my heart. One night, as embers glowed and the stream's murmur lulled us, we stepped onto the deck, the star-pricked sky a vast canvas overhead. Lying on the weathered boards, blankets beneath us, our hands sought each other in the velvet dark, tentative fingers first, then interlacing with a firmness that spoke of deeper angers. The touch grounded me, stars wheeling above as if celebrating our secret, and I felt the romance crest, a wave of hope crashing against the shores of my restraint. As midnight deepened, we retreated inside, the fire's remnants casting flickering shadows. Curled on the oversized couch, her head pillowed on my thigh, my fingers combing through her curls in rhythmic strokes, vulnerability seeped in. She shifted, her eyes finding mine in the low light, and the air hummed with possibility. Our first true kiss unfolded there, unhurried and profound, her lips soft as brushed silk against mine, tasting of mulled cider and unspoken vows, my hand cradling her nape as if she might dissolve. It deepened slowly, a exploration of breath shared, tongues tentative in their greeting, her body arching toward me with a sigh I felt more than heard. We parted reluctantly, foreheads resting together, the world narrowed to the thrum of our pulses. Dawn crept in too soon, painting the room in hesitant thanks, and we rose with the pretense half repaired, packing in a haze of lingering glances. But the seed was sown, curiosity looping endlessly. How long could we sustain the facade when every fiber yearned for truth? The drive home left me suspended, the cabin's warmth a ghost on my skin, pulling me toward the inevitable unraveling. The turning point arrived like a fault line shifting beneath stable ground, fracturing our carefully curated illusion with a jolt that reverberated through every guarded corner of my soul. It unfolded at Jamie's family estate during a harvest gathering, an annual affair she'd reluctantly invited me to as her trusted confidant, a role that masked the deeper reliance we'd forged. Her kin were a tapestry of tradition, aunts with pearl clutches and uncles barking laughter over aged scotch, all orbiting the expectation that Jamie, their prodigal painter, would soon tether herself to convention. She'd confessed her dread in fragmented thoughts during our walks, the subtle interrogations about suitors, the sidelong judgments on her unconventional solitude, and so we conspired, I'd be the buffer, the platonic ally to deflect with tales of shared adventures, keeping our secret love veiled in plain sight. The house sprawled in golden autumn light, vines heavy with grapes draping the pergola, the air rich with roasting chestnuts and fermenting earth. We arrived arm in arm, a gesture dismissed as friendly solidarity, but the contact sent familiar sparks skittering up my spine. Throughout the afternoon, we navigated the throng with practiced ease, her hand slipping into mine under the laden banquet table, fingers squeezing in silent Morse code during her mother's probing queries, me brushing a leaf from her hair during a garden stroll, my touch lingering to trace the shell of her ear, eliciting a flush that bloomed like wild rose. Laughter rang out, hers bright and deflecting, mine a steady undercurrent, but beneath, the chemistry simmered, every glance a brushstroke adding depth to our hidden portrait. Wine loosened tongues and inhibitions, the clink of glasses a rhythmic underscore to the building tension, her thigh warm against mine on the wicker settee as dusk painted the sky in bruised indigos. Then the pivot, her cousin, a sharp-eyed woman with a penchant for gossip, cornered Jamie near the dessert trays, their heads bent in conspiratorial whisper. I watched from afar, heart clenching as Jamie's posture stiffened, her free-spirited ease fracturing into something brittle. Later, in the dim pantry amid jars of preserves glowing like captured sunsets, she drew me in with a tug on my sleeve, the space cramped and scented with vanilla and cloves. Her hand found mine beneath the shelf's shadow, gripping with a desperation that mirrored my own rising panic. The cousin's words had pierced the veil, musing aloud that we carried ourselves like something more, a casual observation laced with implication. Jamie's eyes, wide and stormy, searched mine, and in that confined intimacy, the air crackled. I stepped closer, our bodies aligning in the narrow aisle, and she leaned in, her lips capturing mine in our second kiss, fiercer than the cabin's tenderness, born of defiance and need, her mouth urgent against mine, tasting of spiced pear tart and the salt of restrained tears. My hands framed her face, thumbs sweeping her cheekbones as I returned it with equal fervor, the world narrowing to the slide of her tongue, the press of her against the shelves. We broke apart gasping, the pantry door creaking a warning, and retreated to the fray with flushed cheeks and averted eyes, the pretense a tattered cloak now. The drive home was a tempest in itself, rain resuming its assault on the windshield, blurring the taillights ahead into smeared rubies. Visibility faltered on a curving back road, forcing us to pull onto a gravel shoulder, the engine's hum the only sound in the cocoon of the car. Steam bloomed on the glass from our shared heat, sealing us in a private fog, and she turned to me, her profile etched in the dashboard's glow, eyes glistening with the unshed weight of the evening. Without preamble, She bridged the console, her hand cupping my jaw as her lips met mine again. A third kiss, slower, more deliberate, unraveling the threads of doubt with its depth, her fingers threading into my hair to hold me steady. I melted into it, my body angling toward hers, the confined space amplifying every sensation, the leather seat creaking under my shift, the reins tattoo a frantic counterpoint to our slowing breaths. Yet, as passion ebbed into aftershocks, a shadow crossed her features, conflict-etching lines around her mouth, her hand withdrawing as if burned. Back at my apartment, the threshold became a chasm. She hovered there, rain-slicked and hesitant, her gaze dropping to the floorboards as if answers lay in their grain. I reached for her, a silent entreaty, but she stepped back, offering only a lingering hug that pressed her heartbeat against mine like a Morse code farewell, erratic, pleading, unresolved. The door clicked shut behind her, echoing in the sudden emptiness, and I slid down it, knees buckling under the surge of turmoil. The twist had landed. Our kiss, our secret laid bare in fragments, now threatened to upend everything. Friendship's facade, once our sanctuary, lay in ruins, and the love beneath, fierce and uncharted, demanded reckoning. Doubts swirled like the storm outside, curiosity a hook in my gut. Had we crossed into bliss or beckoned destruction? The night stretched into an abyss of what-ifs, leaving me adrift on waves of longing and dread. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you don't miss the next one. In the wake of that charged departure, tension coiled through my days like smoke from a smoldering fire, insidious and inescapable, tightening around my lungs until every breath carried the ache of her absence. The kiss replayed in relentless loops, the plush give of her lips, the faint tremor in her exhale against my skin, the way her fingers had dug into my shoulders as if anchoring to a cliff's edge, a memory that both soothed and scorched. Yet Jamie withdrew into a shell of brevity, texts reduced to emojis and curt updates on her latest canvas, our ritual coffees postponed with sighs I imagined heavy with regret. I paced my apartment, blueprints forgotten on the drafting table, my inner world a battlefield of rationalizations and recriminations. Was the kiss a bridge or a breach? Our pretense as friends had been armor, flawed but functional. Now, stripped bare, I confronted the raw vulnerability beneath, my history of lovers who had wielded intimacy like a weapon, leaving me adrift in self-doubt, terrified that loving her fully might summon the same storm. My fears were a labyrinth. At 32, with scars from a decade of measured risks, I questioned if I could match her 28-year-old fire, her unjaded dreams that painted the world in bold primaries while mine lingered in cautious grays. External pressures compounded the internal gale, her looming solo exhibition, a career pinnacle demanding isolation in her studio, turpentine fumes and sleepless nights pulling her from me, my own deadlines, towering glass facades rising under my blueprints, late hours in fluorescent-lit offices that echoed with her phantom laughter. Grief for what we'd lost mingled with the secret longing, nights where I'd curl into sheets still faintly scented with her lavender, tracing phantom paths where her hand had once rested on my hip. Hope flickered, a stubborn ember. Perhaps distance was her way of gathering courage, mirroring my own hesitations born of family shadows, mine, a conservative upbringing that had equated queerness with quiet endurance rather than celebration. The escalation crested on a slate-gray Tuesday, impulse overriding caution as I navigated the familiar streets to her studio loft, the building's brick facade scarred by ivy like old wounds. The door yielded to my knock with a groan, and I stepped into the ordered chaos, half-finished canvases leaning like sentinels, palettes crusted with defiant colors, the air thick with solvents, and the metallic tang of creativity. She stood at her easel, Back to me, brush slashing across the surface in strokes that spoke of inner fury, broad sweeps of crimson bleeding into midnight blue, a visual scream I felt in my bones. My approach was silent, heart hammering a war drum, and when she pivoted, brush dripping, her eyes held a maelstrom, surprise melting into relief, then hardening into the walls we'd both erected. No retreat this time. The space between us shrank as if magnetized, my hands finding her waist, pulling her flush against me in a collision that stole the air. Our fourth kiss ignited there, against the raw canvas's edge, hungry, unyielding, her lips parting under mine with a gasp that vibrated through us, tasting of black coffee and suppressed fury. She responded with equal abandon, one hand fisting my shirt, the other sliding beneath the hem to trace the dip of my spine, fingers splaying wide in exploratory arcs that arched my back, drawing me closer. Right there, my mind whispered in silent plea as her touch found the knotted tension between my shoulder blades, strokes guided and knowing, unraveling knots I'd carried for years. The intimacy escalated, bodies sinking in a tentative rhythm, her thigh slipping between mine, pressure building in waves that crested and receded, our breaths harmonizing in ragged crescendo. It was a release, emotional and physical, her presence eroding the barriers I'd fortified, leaving me exposed and empowered in the queer joy of mutual discovery. We peaked together in that cluttered sanctum, a shared shudder that blurred boundaries, her unraveling mirroring my own as walls dissolved in the heat. But as the haze lifted, spent and tangled amid drop cloths, reality's chill seeped in. She withdrew slightly, propping on an elbow, her gaze distant as if scanning a horizon I couldn't see, whispers of doubt in her furrowed brow, hints of the familial noose tightening around her choices. I traced her collarbone with a fingertip, a silent anchor, but the conflict lingered, a shadow over our glow. The stakes soared. This wasn't mere dalliance. It was love demanding voice, risking the fragile orbit we'd maintained. Nights thereafter amplified the torment, alone in my bed, replaying her touch, the fear of permanent fracture warring with the hope of deeper union, leaving open loops of what fragile thread might yet bind us. Just a quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and stay with us here on Sapphic Tales. The emotional undercurrents swelled into a riptide during our long-planned mountain escape, a clarifying retreat we'd booked before the kisses, now fraught with the weight of our silences. The drive ascended twisting passes, evergreens blurring into a verdant haze, the cab thick with the unspoken, her playlist of indie folk strumming melancholic strings that plucked at my resolve, my white-knuckled grip on the wheel betraying the storm within. Trails unfurled like veins through the forest, crunching underfoot with brittle leaves that mirrored the fragility of our steps side by side. Hands brushed in feigned accident, hers catching mine on a root-gnarled path, holding a beat too long under the pretext of steadiness, each contact a spark reigniting the tinder of our connection. At a promontory overlook, wind keening through pines like a lament, she halted, turning to me with wind-tossed curls framing eyes that held the sky's vast uncertainty. Her fingers wove through mine deliberately then, palm to palm in the open air, a declaration disguised as support, and I squeezed back, the pressure conveying volumes. Stay. Fight. Choose us. That evening in the cabin, a rustic area of exposed beams and stone hearth, the fire's crackle wove a spell, flames dancing shadows across log walls, scented with resin and smoke. We settled on the threadbare rug, knees drawn up, the proximity a gravitational pull until her shoulder nestled against mine, her head descending to rest there with a sigh that resonated in my chest. My arm encircled her instinctively, fingers drumming a soothing cadence on her upper arm, the wool of her sweater rough under my touch. The closeness built inexorably, a slow simmer, her hand covering mine, guiding it to her waist, my lips brushing her temple in what began as comfort but bloomed into intent. Our fifth kiss unfolded by firelight, languid and exploratory, lips grazing, then sealing with a depth that tasted of trail dust and pine-kissed air, her tongue tracing mine in lazy spirals that drew a low hum from my throat. It evolved into more, body shifting to the sheepskin rug, her form arching beneath me as hands ventured bolder paths, mine slipping under her shirt to map the gentle curve of her ribs, eliciting shivers that synced our breaths, hers exploring the hollow of my throat, then lower, strokes precise and attuned, finding the spots that made stars burst behind my eyelids right there, where release uncoiled in tandem waves, our peaks a harmonious crest of vulnerability and power. She unraveled my defenses thread by silken thread, the act a queer affirmation of joy, bodies and souls aligning in empowered rhythm. Morning pierced the idyll with glacial light, birdsong a mocking counterpoint as we stirred amid rumpled blankets, limbs still loosely entwined. But the fragile peace shattered with her phone's insistent trill, a family summons, voice on the line, unheard but felt in her tensing frame, layering guilt and expectation, probing her distractions with veiled barbs about stability, about choices that didn't align with their tapestry. She hung up with a clipped nod, but the damage lingered, a chill settling as we packed in terse efficiency, the cabin's warmth curdling into isolation. The descent twisted my gut, thoughts spiraling. Had our night forged unbreakable bonds, or merely illuminated the chasms? Hope and heartbreak dueled in the rear view, the mountains receding like a dream half-remembered, leaving me adrift in escalating stakes, love's precipice, where one misstep could plummet us into irreparable void. The crisis erupted at the zenith of her art show, a glittering vortex in the gallery's vaulted space where her visions hung like confessions on white walls, swirling abstracts of concealed longings, crimson tendrils coiling around azure voids that now screamed our story to my attuned eye. The crowd milled in a haze of perfume and murmurs, clinking flutes casting prismatic refractions, but I navigated it as her shadow, the loyal friend in tailored black, every step a performance masking the secret that thrummed beneath my skin. Our eyes met across the room in charged flickers, hers alight with nervous pride, mine heavy with the weight of our recent intimacies, the cabin's echoes still warming my veins. Proximity lured us into orbits, her hand grazing my lower back as she introduced me to patrons, a touch that lingered like a brand, me studying her elbow during a toast, fingers squeezing in silent solidarity amid the din. Then, the fracture, her ex, Elena, sleek and unyielding as polished obsidian, materialized from the throng, drawn like a moth to Jamie's flame, her presence a specter from whispered histories of passion soured by possessiveness. She hovered too near, arm brushing Jamie's in feigned casualness, her low tones weaving webs of reminiscence that tightened Jamie's jaw, flushed her cheeks with discomfort. Jealousy ignited in me, a visceral blaze scorching my composure, visions of Elena's hands where mine had roamed, her claims staking territory I'd only begun to explore. I fled to the shadowed alcove behind a partition, the cool wall pressing against my back as tears pricked hot and unbidden, chest heaving with the storm of inadequacy. Was I enough, or just a placeholder in her unfolding narrative? Jamie found me there, slipping through the velvet drape like a guardian spirit, her expression a canvas of concern and resolve. No hesitation, she closed the scant distance, enveloping me in her arms, our bodies melding in the dim seclusion as her lips claimed mine in a sixth kiss, desperate, devouring, a lifeline amid the gale, tasting of champagne fizz and raw need. Her hands cradled my face, thumbs dashing away the damp trails on my cheeks, pulling me deeper into the press of her, the partition muffling the outer revelry. It was a confession incarnate, fervent and unscripted, her form molding to mine in shadowed urgency, breaths mingling in frantic harmony. We surfaced gasping, foreheads abutting, but the sanctuary imploded, footsteps echoing, voices nearing from her family circuit, forcing a frantic disentangle, her hand squeezing mine once, twice, in frantic Morse before she vanished into the light. That night, her apartment became our confessional. The door barely latched before we collided anew, tumbling onto the unmade bed in a tangle of limbs and shed inhibitions, the room awash in the glow of street lamps filtering through gauzy curtains. We clung through the breakdown, her body curling into mine as sobs racked us both, silent torrents for the fears we'd harbored, my dread of abandonment's echo, her terror of familial rejection eclipsing her truth. In the hush, vulnerabilities spilled in gestures, her fingers tracing scars on my heart I'd never voiced, mine combing her hair in soothing sweeps as if to weave security from strands. Another kiss bloomed from the wreckage, slow and salvific, lips exploring with healing intent, evolving into a deeper union, hands venturing beneath fabric, spines arching under guided caresses right there, where knots of grief dissolved in synchronized surges. Our peaks a cathartic release, bodies entwining in waves of queer-embraced ecstasy, her essence unraveling my fortified core. The afterglow cradled us, limbs interlaced in languid repose, hearts thundering in unison, but the crisis crested in her subtle withdrawal, a hand pausing mid-caress, eyes clouding with the specter of retreat, whispers of too much, too soon, etched in her furrowed brow. Was this the precipice of goodbye, our love's secret consuming itself in the blaze? The emotional nadir left me shattered, hope guttering in the void, curiosity a cruel hook. Could we rise from these ashes, or would loss claim us utterly? Don't forget, every week we share new tales. Subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you're always the first to hear them. The abyss of those ensuing days was a velvet darkness, swallowing light and routine alike, my world reduced to grayscale echoes without her vibrancy. Mornings dawned hollow, coffee bitter on my tongue as I stared at blueprints that blurred through unshed tears, each line a reminder of structures I'd built to contain chaos, yet failed against this. Memories assaulted me in waves, the precise fit of her hand in mine under tables laden with pretense, the playful arc of her brow when she'd accidentally append my planner, scattering order into delightful disarray. The curve of her smile in firelight, lips parted in mid-laugh, a beacon I'd followed blindly. Grief coiled tight, a serpent in my gut, hissing fears of finality, had our secret love, once a cherished bloom, withered under exposure's glare? Professional stakes loomed larger in the silence, her show hailed as a triumph in reviews I pored over obsessively, yet no word from her. My projects teetered on deadlines, focus fracturing as I drafted and redrafted, seeking in geometry the stability she'd appended. Hope persisted, a fragile lantern in the gloom, glimmers in a lavender sachet she'd left in my drawer, its scent of phantom embrace, in the half-finished sketch on my fridge, her looping script annotating my precise elevations with whimsical flourishes. But fear dominated, a tidal pull dragging me toward despair, visions of her folding back into solitude, Elena's shadow lengthening, or worse, her family's influence reshaping her into a version that excluded me. Nights blurred into vigils, sheets twisted from restless dreams where we teetered on cliffs, hands slipping inch by inch. The emotional swings battered me, surges of resolve to march to her door, quelled by waves of self-doubt, the age gap a chasm whispering I was the anchor, not the sail. Longing carved hollows under my eyes, discovery's thrill soured into loss's bite, release the distant mirage. Don't forget, more stories like this are waiting. Subscribe now to Sapphic Tales before we continue. Resolution dawned not with fanfare but a quiet thunder. A knock shattering the midnight hush of my apartment 3 nights into exile. Jamie, drenched from a sudden squall, curls plastered to her temples, eyes fierce with the clarity of desperation. The door yielded, and she surged across the threshold like a tide-reclaiming shore, her sodden coat shedding rivulets as arms encircled me, pulling me into a 7th kiss that tasted of rain and redemption, tender at first, a balm to abraded souls, then deepening with the urgency of reclamation, her lips molding to mine in forgiveness's arc, breath sinking in harmonious relief. My hands roamed her back, bunching wet fabric, drawing her closer until the chill evaporated in our shared heat, the entryway a threshold crossed into renewal. We migrated to the bedroom in a trail of discarded layers, the space sanctified by candlelight's flicker, beeswax, and vanilla weaving a cocoon around the king-sized bed, its linens crisp and inviting. Bodies reunited with reverent exploration, her palms sliding under my shirt, tracing the familiar valleys of my spine with strokes that elicited arches and sighs, guiding me to surrender right there, where vestiges of doubt melted in empowered currents. Our forms aligning in rhythmic undulation, peaks cresting in tandem exultation, a queer symphony of joy and release. She unraveled me anew, walls crumbling into dust, the act a testament to our healing, emotional scars soothed by her knowing touch, the age gap bridged in mutual vulnerability. The afterglow enveloped us like a benediction, limbs entwined in indolent sprawl, heart's cadences merging into a singular lullaby, her fingers idly circling my wrist, a silent affirmation echoing in my core, feels safe, this, us, finally whole. The storm of pretense had forged us through chaos to this unshakable connection, whispers of future adventures, shared studios, midnight blueprints annotated in color, hinting at horizons unbound. As sleep claimed us that first true night together, her form curled spoon-like against mine, breath warm on my nape, I surrendered to the vulnerability of it all, the weight of her thigh draped over my hip, the steady rise-fall of her chest sinking with mine. Comfort a tangible weave in the sheet's embrace. No pretenses lingered, just the profound ease of her nearness, warmth seeping bone deep, chasing shadows to forgotten corners. In that velvet drift, bedside intimacies unfolded without words, my hand resting over hers on my abdomen, conveying hopes for mornings unhurried, canvases co-created, her chin tucking into the curve of my shoulder. Secrets of fears past shared in the subtle press of skin, deepening the tapestry we'd weave henceforth. Dawn filtered soft, gilding her sleeping face, and I traced its planes with gaze alone, marveling at the transformation, from secret longings caged to this liberated dawn. Reflecting in the quiet hours that followed, our journey crystallized, the fake friendship a chrysalis cracked open by twists of kiss and crisis, yielding butterflies of authentic love. We'd healed fractures with humor's light touch, her teasing disarray now a cherished counterpoint to my order, and pain's honest forge, emerging stronger, queer hearts entwined in discovery's glow. Heartbreak had been the crucible, hope the philosopher's stone, fear transmuted to fierce resolve. This was no endpoint but a poetic pivot, our secret no longer a burden but a bridge to endless canvases, shared sunrises over coffee steam, walks where hands laced openly, nights of synced dreams under starlit roofs. In her, I'd found not just a lover but a co-architect of futures, the age between us a mere footnote to the eternity we'd claim. As she stirred, eyes fluttering open to meet mine with sleepy promise, I knew we'd pretended once, but now, in love's unfeigned light, we soared. If it kept you hooked, Subscribe now to Sapphic Tales so you never miss the next. Our love, unveiled and unyielding, painted the world anew, strokes of crimson passion on azure skies, a masterpiece forever in progress.